Hello, Satan here, RP representative of Amazon Game Studio, and I have a promise to make to you, our future New World players. After nearly a year's delay, bringing in consultants to be told if killing Native Americans as NPCs might be a bad idea, and launching 0 successful games, we now know what you know, and we hear you. And that's why I'm here today to promise, on the souls of the children that work here, under Dark Contract Article 66.6, written in blood, that we will not introduce anything to our cash shop that isn't purely cosmetic. That's right, you heard me. No XP boosts, stat bonuses, fast travel tokens, or anything else that could be considered giving you an edge over other players with less money. This will take place so long as we draw breath, until at least 2022. In our generosity, we're giving you a full 4 months after New World releases before we try to gouge out your wallet with a rusty spoon. That's our promise to you, on the mortal souls of our employees. You are welcome.
This is Crashed While Loading, the fusion of entertainment and information.
Hello there.
Weekly updates and opinions on video games,
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
movies,
I'm about to do to you what Limp Bizkit did to music in the late 90s.
TV shows,
This is the way.
This is the way.
and so much more.
JJ, what do you want to do tonight?
Off. We need to go on a quick adventure.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Welcome to the 35th episode of Crash While Loading, and I, of course, am your host, Ashton Phoenix, and this is still the official podcast of Antarctica, because nobody can contest me. At least nobody has so far. Appreciate you tuning in. I've got a lot of good stuff for you today. Some reviews, some dumb news, some bad news, some good news, and something entirely different. It's honestly, I'm a little nervous about it, believe it or not. It won't be a whole lot of comedy during that portion of it. But today marks the one. No, not. Actually, yes, it is today. Today, tomorrow, and the June 1st. But this is the 100-year anniversary of something in America here called the Tulsa Race Massacre. As I learned it, it was the Tulsa Race Riot, but that was been updated to probably a more accurate description. And it turns out, as we've been going through this here in the area, not a lot of people are even aware of its existence. In fact, even Renfail on the show just recently said the first time he saw it was in the episode of Watchmen, and then there's also we saw it as well in I just forgot. He was a really racist guy too, which is why I thought it was great that it was a black crowd. Lovecraft Country. They had an episode where they went back to the race riot in 1921. So politics, all that stuff has nothing to do with this. This is actually something that happened. It's historical. And I'm going to go over that briefly at the end of the show. I mean, I say briefly, but it'll probably take 10, 15 minutes or more. Just the facts of what it was, what happened, what that community was like before, and what's happened since and during. I'm a lover of history. No country is perfect. America, Canada, Mexico, Germany. That one seems a little bit more obvious than some, but no country ever has a clean history. We've all got bad stuff, and you can't learn to do the right thing and if you're constantly trying to erase the history and the past of the bad things as well. So I'm a big believer in learning history regardless of if it's good or bad or reflects one way or the other on the country or the people of the time. It matters more what you do with that after the fact. So that'll be something a little different. But that's going to be the end of the show. Hopefully you stick around for that. Before we get into all of that, though, there is some reviews that I finished some games. Hellblade's Senua Sacrifice and Resident Evil The Village, as well as watching Netflix's Thunder Force. I mean, I had... well, let's get into it.
This is Crash While Loading's Half-Ass Reviews. Maybe we finished it. Maybe we didn't. But either way, here's what we thought of it.
So, oops, wrong one. So let's go with the fact that I'm apparently incapable of actually clicking on a link. Yeah, I know we watched it. We were curious. Sybil wanted to watch it, and I told her, I was like, regardless of what it is, it'll give me something to talk about on the show. Gives me something to talk about on the show. So if you don't know what Thunder Force is, it's a Netflix movie with Melissa McCarthy and Octavia Spencer, who I actually like both of. Melissa McCarthy can be hit or miss because she chooses pretty much every movie that that comes at her. Octavia Spencer, she was in Maw, and she's been in a lot of other stuff. I think The Help, she was one of my favorite characters in that. The helper that was like, eat my shit, and baked her crap into the lady's pie, which was fantastic. It also has Jason Bateman as a crab man. He's got crab arms. And honestly, he was probably the best thing in the entire movie. And don't get me wrong, it had a few laugh-out-loud funny moments, but it had a lot of not as funny moments at all. The constant stinky jokes of their suits, and some of them they just started wearing thin. It's a very basic movie. I think, let's see what it's got, a 4.4 out of 10 here on IMDb, and I would say out of 32,807 reviews, I would say that's probably accurate. It's easily a 4 or 5 star movie out of 10, not out of 5. But it did have a lot of laugh out loud funny moments. Like I said, Sib fell asleep during part of it. I mean, she was laying next to me, and I'm extremely warm in nature, and her being, I think, the female version of Mr. Freeze, that warmth puts her to sleep, which is why she's always defeated by Batman every chance she gets out and tries to make a nuisance of herself. I'll get you. Let's see if I can do that one. I'll get you next time, Batman. Need to do a Joker thing sometime. But yeah, it was... you know what you're getting into. It's a Melissa McCarthy movie. It's on Netflix. They're pretty hit or miss. So, yeah, easily I'd say 4 or 5 out of 10. And other things that weren't somewhat... Whoops. Oh, yeah, because it had 2 things in there. That's why that did that. You have it on... This is why this show is only being listened to by one guy. This is... And I love that guy, Ericus. Fan of the show. Canadian ambassador to the show. He's a fantastic, upstanding guy. That's all I got. I don't really have a joke for that. I mean... He's a role player. Anyway, love you, Eric. Ericus, for letting me tease you in your glorious country. Most of which is empty. Kind of like Australia. Anyway, this is beside the point. But the other one I played through, and I don't know what took me so long to get through this. I tried it once, and it wasn't bad. I just got distracted because, again, this show is largely powered by adult ADHD, as you can tell by listening to me speak for 2 seconds. And then one of those seconds is an entirely different topic than the first. But Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which I was playing it, I think I got it on PC. It's on Game Pass now, if I remember correctly. That's how I was playing it there and why I was playing it there. And I was playing on the Series X, and it's a fantastic game. Visually, it's wonderful. The audio design with the whispers and whatnot are absolutely fantastic. The story is great. It has 3 of the 4 big components in a game. The 4th one being the combat that they put into it, which is extremely basic and honestly the least important thing about the entire game. I put it on easy mode because it's even that it still could be a struggle at times. It's nothing like a Souls game or anything like that. It's just that you have 2 strikes, you have a block, you have a dodge, and then you have a focus, which is kind of flash fries the enemies. You get it eventually. But the enemies all do. There's only 6 or so, 7 maybe different variations. They all look exactly the same. They only come up every now and then. It's very, very unimportant to... I mean, it's important to the story, but it's unimportant to the gameplay. A lot of the gameplay is just listening to the audio cues as the story is told as she progresses through to the gates of hell. I'm not going to spoil on this one because honestly, it's just too good. It's one you really should play through if you like narrative-driven games. At times, it can kind of feel like a walking simulator outside of the combat. Because you'll come to these gates that have runes on them, and then in order to unlock them, you have to find that symbol or that rune somewhere in the map, and that can be the way 2 shadows line up to form like I call it a P rune, or you see burning embers on the ground that make up the rune, or one of them was a reflection in the water. There was only half of it was in the water, but when you looked at it at a certain angle, it became the double side of it. Reflecting back was the rune. And it's environmental puzzles and a lot of that. And it's really interesting. There are a couple boss fights, and again, the combat is it's fairly basic. They do the same video game patterns over and over. P what? And your apologies accepted. But yeah, so Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. It's rave reviews. It's an older game now, like by 2 or 3 years. A sequel is actually in the works and coming out. The trailer for it was fucking fantastic. Very creepy, but visually, it's just an amazing looking game. And the audio design, they actually say it's best to be played with headphones. I did it on the surround sound system, and that worked. Honestly, I did it with both. Sometimes I play at night when Sib was sleeping, so I put my headphones on, and there's my phone. Let's turn that down so that doesn't happen again on the show. Oh, good. And it's me getting those things, those text messages from emails that you can't block or stop. Sib had a problem with that, and she had to call AT&T to get it to stop, and that's probably what I'm going to have to do now, too, because it only gets worse. Fantastic. That's so much fun. But yeah, then it really worked both ways for me. The audio and surround sound versus the audio in the headsets, both were really good. But highly recommended if you got Game Pass or if you just want to play it. It's been out long enough. It's incredibly cheap. It's probably, 6-7 hour game, I think is what I played through. It's fairly short as they go, but like I said, it's pretty cheap this time. The other one was Resident Evil: The Village. We finally finished that. Kind of give you a spoiler-free review on that one. I liked it. I think it peaked. There's, I think I've mentioned, if you see the trailer, you can see the Four Lords. You got Demetress. There's somebody else. There's a doll lady. There's a Moreau, who's a fish man, and then there's Heisenberg, which is the guy with the glasses you see in the trailers, and then, Mother Miranda, who they mention. They're all the big bosses. But after the second boss, in my opinion, that's kind of where the game peaked, because it took a totally different thing in the dollhouse. You didn't have your weapons, and the tension they built up was fantastic. On Moreau, graphically, it was probably my least impressed, I'll say, just because of the slime textures on stuff. It still looked good, but it didn't look next generation kind of good. And then the factory with Heisenberg had a lot of sameness to it. It was really a lot of dark corridors and steel and things like that, and it got a bit repetitive. It was also probably one of the longer ones, like Demetres Castle, but at least Demetres Castle, every area was felt and looked unique. But the factory was just so steel and walls and all that. It didn't really grab the same way that the castle did. And that's not to say we didn't have a great time. We played the hell out of it. It was still fun. I kind of have to nitpick to find the bad sides of it. I'd still give the game easily like a 9 out of 10. It's one of the... They've definitely found a niche with these first-person Ethan Winters, these last two, which they needed that win. After 5 and 6 they were not good. They were not great. They did so good with 4, which, I have a feeling we'll probably hear about a Resident Evil 4 remake. I'm predicting by the end of the year that they'll announce that they're making Resident Evil 4 remake. And this is just a guess, but given how quickly 2 and 3 came out, and the fact, or a remaster, I suppose they could easily remaster that one, because it was already so good and did the over-the-shoulder Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake thing. And yes, her name is pronounced Dimitrescu, not Dimitrescu, as everyone was saying. Dimitrescu. It's Romanian, because sure, even though all the people there had American accents, which was a little weird for a Romanian style European village, I don't think a single one of them had an accent of the region. Not the main guys, not the boss guys, not the villagers, not you, not Chris Redfield. No, yeah, they're all American as Americans living in this European country. It's, now that I think about it, that's kind of ironic. But it doesn't take away from it. It really was like 9 out of 10. I'm kind of nitpick on a lot of that stuff, but you kind of have to, because it's what you do. No, they are all living there for generations. Eric is in the chat, asked if they were immigrants. No, it's like an old village, and they've been here for at least 100 years or so, and probably longer. I think they just grew up in the area. It's just one of those things that I think they just like, we got American actors, let's just do the American actor thing. They got old guys. We got all these guys over here. Sure, she's a Romanian, 9'6" tall vampire chick, but the voice actress we got's really good, so she don't do the accent so well. I don't know that that's true, but so we'll just have her do that. I actually think she probably could. I've seen her, which is one of those things that actually annoys me. She may not be like the voice actress herself has been doing a lot of stuff on IGN, and she is not what you would call maybe a classically attractive woman, but the people bashing on her just for her looks, I'm like, dude, she's great in this game. Fantastic. It's like people beating up on Allie from The Last of Us Part 2, the voice actress, because they didn't like the character. What the hell is wrong with people? And given, all the people doing that are probably only seen they're probably typing that out with their Cheeto-covered fingers and, licking the inside-out bag of a Doritos bag. Just licking the corners, trying to get all the Cheeto and Dorito goo that's left over, residue, as they, make fun of somebody on the internet. Oh yeah, Resident Evil: The Village. It was good. Now get back on topic. Another thing too. Apparently, Biomutant came out. a lot of people were really hyped up for this for some reason. I've been skeptical since I saw the first video. It looked kind of janky to me and looked very meh. And apparently, according to a lot of the reviews I'm seeing, that seems to hold true. Maybe I'll try it if it comes out on like Game Pass or something, but I'll be honest, I've very little interest in a bunch of rodents, mutant rodents running around in a post-apocalyptic world. It was a big draw for a lot of people. Some people, like the guy's review at Game Ranks, he really liked it. Others at IGN and a few other places, they were kind of meh, like, 5s and 6s on it. It really seems like one of those things where if you're in the mood for that type of game, and you'll do great. The combat sounds like it gets pretty basic, in the open world, while neat, is also fairly empty. I'm just going off of what I've heard. Unfortunately, I'm not willing, since I don't get free reviews for things like that. Not that I'm asking for them, because I wouldn't know what to do with my time if I did. All right, I had to take a drink. I probably would have only spent a little time with it. I don't want to spend $60 on a game. It looks like I will not. Yes, Ericus, mixed reviews are pretty redolent, and I don't have time. Honestly, I'm playing through the Mass Effect Legendary Edition still. I'm still like 25, 30 hours into that. And I'm still on the first game, so I've still got plenty to do. And then I got sidetracked with Hellblade for a little bit, and so that took some time off of that. And I'm playing Final Fantasy 14. So I kind of do a lot of stuff. I watch a lot of things too. But yeah, it's just I can't personally justify it. Maybe if other people out there, if it's your jam, man, give it a try and let me know. I'd be happy to hear what other people have to think. But from what I've seen, it's pretty. It's either one of those things you're really into already and you like that style of gameplay, or you just don't, because it doesn't really do anything new. I think the biggest thing that turned me off was one review was saying about how you have to go and collect shit out in the world, and that is one of my least favorite things to do, is just run around and just pick things up off the ground to collect them, or kill things to collect them. It's especially in a single player game. I don't kill things and collect them. I don't mind killing things, but just running around to pick things up, I'm not a big fan. Moving on to, before we get into other news, the Unreal 5 engine tech demo was 15 minutes. It came out. Looks fantastic. I really can't wait for games to see on the next-gen consoles and computers what they can do with Unreal Engine 5. I know a lot of games. What was that? It was most recent. It was going to postpone it a year because of that. And I can't remember now. Wasn't Call of Duty. Oh, Gears of War. Gears of War 6, actually, is going from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5 engine, and because of that, it added an extra, it'll be 4 years instead of the usual 3 before that one comes out. But from what I've seen of this tech demo, that is absolutely the right move to do, because it looks like it's got a lot of beefy stuff under the hood. I don't know a lot about that stuff. I'm not a developer. I'm not a programmer. I'm just a gamer that's interested in those things. But what the demo showed, and the tools available, and the integration of a lot of the assets and the way you can duplicate them and things like that, were fantastic. I saw somebody, they took like a digital picture of their dog in their bed, and they replicated that, I think, almost 10,000 times. It was like billions or a trillion polygons on the screen, and it handled it fine. And he didn't have a bad computer. He had a good computer. It had, I think, a 3000 series, or a NVIDIA, and it was fairly beefy. It was a beefy gaming computer, but it was nothing like what you would program and do these kinds of things on. It wasn't that kind of level, and it handled it perfectly, apparently. So that's very promising. I like that stuff. I'm always excited when new engines, like the RE engine that Resident Evil is built in, is great. It's a good looking thing. It makes a lot of really good looking games. So if you haven't seen that, but you're interested, definitely check it out. It popped up on a couple feeds, and of course I like the fun-loving weekend party gamer I am. I sat down for 15 minutes and actually watched the entire thing from start to finish. Moving on, this turns out that this is a thing that had me getting up out of my chair in the middle of Army of the Dead and tapping my screen, and it was really pissing me off and worrying me. I missed like probably 15 minutes of the movie looking up what how to fix dead pixels, because apparently in Netflix's Army of the Dead with Dave Bautista, which I talked about last week, the way it was shot, there's dead pixels in the goddamn movie. It can actually make it look like you've got pixels that have, or that they get it looks like they're stuck on. It's just a bright white dot that doesn't move. It's freeze framed in the thing, so everyone's moving around it. So it was really noticeable. But apparently this comes about because Zack Snyder, the way they're saying it's the way he filmed it. He filmed it with where did it go? Because he had a lot of blurred effects, and his use of a 50mm f/.095 lenses, and his decision not to stop using them, overwhelmed light sources. So basically, he's using a Canon Dream lens from built in the 1960s, but he's going through like an 8K camera, and so if the glare on there hits on the camera lens hits it just right, it basically blinds out the dead pixels in the shot. How they missed that and why they didn't get it, I don't know. But I noticed this several times during the movie. They'd go away and then they'd come back somewhere else. No, it wasn't on purpose either, Ericus. It's actually kind of being a problem for them because people are thinking their TVs are going bad. I literally did. Our TV's only several months old, and it's brand new. And I was getting really kind of pissed that I would just about ready to call and see about getting it replaced if it kept up. But then the movie stopped and we watched other things and played other things, and it was just fine. And then I just happened to catch this article from Den of Geek about it, and apparently there are a lot of other people with OLED TVs and 4Ks and TVs and things like that that just got a stuck, they call it a stuck pixel, where it's not, a dead pixel is when it goes black. A stuck pixel is where it can't quite keep up with the things around it, and it just lights up. So yeah, and apparently this isn't the only one. There's several things on Netflix that have this problem, and I don't think this article had it in there. Apparently, I remember off the top of my head, it was it Shadow and Bone was one of them that I didn't see it in that, but there's several of the Netflix originals that seem to have this problem. So if you're watching a Netflix movie on your TV, and all of a sudden you start to notice you have a stuck pixel that's just stuck white, don't worry about it. Especially if you watch something else later on or Hulu and it goes away, it's just fucking Amazon screwing something up, or the way it was shot apparently will cause that. So, in other news, J.J. Abrams confirms that both, let's see here, water is wet, fire burns, the sun is a nuclear reaction, and Nickelback is a joke. Oh, yeah, and that you should probably do a little bit of planning when you do a sequel trilogy, so it doesn't turn into exactly what we had with the sequel trilogy. Yeah, apparently that was something he felt like he did need to come out and say, even though it's something everybody that's watched the sequel trilogy could say succinctly and with college-level effort. No shit, dude. You should have gone into this like one of the biggest franchises on the planet and had a plan in place, not handed off to dumbass Rian Johnson. Because the first one set a lot of things up good. It really did. There was a lot of good promise, and it wasn't a bad movie. It was basically a redo of Episode 4, yes, and it had its problems with the stupid Death Star 2 with the planet killer, and some of the fact that the system that they destroyed seemed to be in the same system that like Han Solo and them were on at the same time, even though that's not supposed to have been where it was. There's issues. But having had a plan in place would have helped. Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe that Disney also owns is a multi-billion-dollar franchise they created out of nothing because they had a plan that DC still can't get right. So, Yeah, Abrams has finally figured that out, apparently. Let's see, said here that he learned the hard way. You just never really know, but having a plan, I have learned, in some cases the hard way, is the most critical thing, because otherwise you don't know what you're setting up. You don't know what to emphasize, because if you don't know the inevitable because if you don't know the inevitable of the story, inevitable ending of the story, I assume, you're just as good as your last sequel or effect or joke or whatever, but you want to be leading into something inevitable. He uses inevitable very, very strangely.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I don't think that it means at all what he thinks it means. But yes, that is exactly what you should have done. You should have had all 3 movies. You maybe not have every line of dialogue and stuff written, but you should have had a plan. Period. You should have known where the characters were going. You should have given an overarching story. Everything should have been planned for each part of that in advance before you filmed one and then handed it off to another dumbass. Only for you to have to come back to fix what dumbass ruined, and thus ruining your movie because you spent a half of it trying to fix the previous stuff that he fucked up and screwed everything apart. So, yes, thank you, JJ, for understanding that perhaps you should know exactly what's going to happen in a trilogy before it starts. Even as bad as they were, even the Hobbit trilogy, when they broke one book up and added all that stuff, even that, they knew what they were doing when they went into it, given they filmed them all back to back to back at the same time. But that's beside the point. They still had it all there, and they knew what was going on. Just stupid. Speaking of stupid, I don't even know what this show is. It just annoyed me that I had to read this. There's an anime apparently called Super Cub. And the headline here from Kotaku is, Anime Super Cub breaks the law, yes, but is fiction. So apparently in this anime there is it's an anime about schoolgirls and a Honda motorcycle. 2 characters are shown riding the same motorcycle. So it's got a dude and a chick. They're riding the motorcycle. She's riding bitch, and that's illegal in Japan. You're not allowed to ride bitch on a motorcycle in Japan. Apparently, fantastic. That's great. Apparently, people noticed this in the episode. And those who violate this traffic law can be fined up to 100,000 yen or $918. And the part I love about this, as reported on Yahoo News Japan, when the episode aired, some viewers pointed out that the scene appears to show characters doing just that, writing doubles. Yahoo News Japan got in touch with Kitakawa, the company behind the anime, and an official spokesperson replied, I have to answer this bullshit? No, that's not what they said. Their Japanese are a lot more polite than that, but that's what he was thinking. The spokesman said, quote, Duh! The story is fictional. The people, the groups, the names are fictional and have no connection to reality. It's a fictional story. Who gives what? The fact that the news media reached out for them on that it just tells you a lot about the way. I have no stranger to utter dislike and disappointment constantly in the news media, gaming especially, but just in general when politics, reporting, anime, comic books. Local stuff. Well, like here, we have a lot of thunderstorms, and they make things like the flooding here at 71st and Garnett is terrible. Well, yeah, unless you pan over 2 feet and we find that you're just sitting in a flooded ravine on the side of the road that has a little spill off. It's not that bad. I just drove by there, jackass. So yeah, the fact that someone's like, hey, riding bitch and doubles on a Japanese motorcycle in a Japanese anime is illegal in Japan. Oh, I would love for the company to get a ticket. That'd just be fantastic. You can't animate people riding doubles on your show. Also, by the way, you're not allowed to have bounty hunters take little green gremlins and traipse them around in space. That's kidnapping. You're under arrest, mister. People are still friggin' stupid. So, in other news, Ericus, I know you've already heard this because I actually could feel your disappointment in the Force, even from all the way down here. BlizzCon is canceled. Yes! One more victory against Blizzard. No, I'm kidding. I really don't care. I feel bad for the fans. But, yeah, apparently BlizzCon is canceled. I'm not surprised. They're not willing to take the risk of a COVID thing, even though the numbers are down, everything's opening back up. I understand the company. There's a lot of stuff where people still aren't sure who would be responsible if, like, in a massive outbreak or something happened. Frankly, having seen people that play World of Warcraft, I don't know that anybody would notice if they started getting sweaty and smelled bad and couldn't breathe well. That's most MMO players anyway. I know. I play MMOs. I'm sweaty. I gasp when I walk 14 feet, and I usually smell bad. I mean, I'm sexy, I smell like roses, and I have the body of Jason Momoa, as far as you know. Don't look at the camera. I'm a virtual streamer. That's my virtual body. My real body is much better looking, but because I don't want everybody tuning in based solely on my looks, I use this very realistic virtual streamer bot, which I'll make it wave at you. See, look at that. It's very lifelike. So that you tune in only for my mind and not for my amazing chiseled granite-like physique. So yeah, Blizzard's canceled. I'm honestly a little... What I don't get with this, because Final Fantasy Fan Fest was canceled too. But it still happened digitally. They had, as you played with the breathtaking rendition from Soken of Lahi, who, again, I can't express how fantastically he did that did that song. I don't know why they're not doing it digitally at all. Perhaps there's still a chance of that. Yeah, they're saying they hope to get back into it. Those preparations are complicated. And coming in order to take place, yeah, I don't know. Maybe November 2022 is what they're saying. That's when they're gonna try to do it. So they just fucking gave up. And there's really that, honestly, Erica says in the chat they're being lazy. That is exactly what I thought. It costs a lot of money. It is a lot of preparation, even to do it digitally. But at the same time, and I'm going to take Ericus's word for it, he's the World of Warcraft player. He knows more about Blizzard than I. Blizzard is one of those places where I know a lot about it, but I don't have the firsthand knowledge and experience of dealing with them day in and day out like I have with other companies and their games and EverQuest 2 and Final Fantasy and Square Enix and stuff like that. Blizzard's kind of a blind spot with me. So he said, so in the meantime, let's see, Smith said, but we don't plan to let it go too long go by before we connect with everyone again. So in the meantime, we're planning a global event for the early part of next year, combining an online show along the lines of the recent BlizzCon line, which, by the way, BlizzCon line is terrible. Just do BlizzCon online. Don't combine two words like con and online just because they share two letters. It sounds dumb. It hurts my ears to say that out loud. So yeah, that's I feel bad for it. Oh yeah, and I forgot Tencent has a lot to do with Blizzard now. So briefly, because there's not a lot to talk about, Dragon Quest XII has been announced. I'm a fan of the Dragon Quest series. I played through Dragon Quest XI. I would have loved to play Dragon Quest X, the MMO. I would absolutely love to play that game, except that it's fucking exclusive to Japan still, after I think it's been out 7 years now. Yes, and I'm aware you can play it on the server if you use a VPN. Yeah, I also don't speak Japanese and feel like going through that much trouble to play an online game. That's just not something I have the time or willpower to do. I'm sure there's mods that might translate a lot of that stuff too, but no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. They're also doing a Dragon Quest III remake, which I thought looked really good. It's in that style of Octopath Traveler. They call it the HD 2D is what I think Square Enix is calling that, where it's 3D animation, but it's made to look like 16-bit pixel art, which I can't get into Octopath, really. I've tried. It's just I don't have that kind of time, and it's a lot of battles and stuff like that. I want to, and I think it's a fantastic game from what I've played, and I just don't have the time for it. I just don't. Same with Dragon Quest III. I doubt I will be able to get that. But it looks really good. They also said that they're coming out with an offline version of Dragon Quest MMO. So if you want a Dragon Quest in your life, you're getting it some. But again, I think the offline version of Dragon Quest X is probably going to be exclusive to Japan still. So on them. But yeah, so Dragon Quest stuff is back in the news, and that's always good. And lastly, before I get to the more historical history lesson, if you missed the beginning of the show, Satan came in and covered this just a bit. New World, I love this. Just the headline is fantastic. New World, quote, won't consider selling anything other than cosmetic items until 2022 at the earliest. Keep in mind, 2022 at the earliest, and I'm going to take earliest to mean as soon as the clock rolls over, just January 1st, 12:01 a.m., 2022, this will probably go live at the cash shop. But the game comes out in August. We don't know when in August. So that would put a solid 4 months between the release of the game and 2022. Remember, we're starting June in 2 days. We're almost halfway through the year. So what the hell kind of promise is that? Yeah, that's idiotic. I love he says here, the store will allow in-game purchases for cosmetic items outside of our deluxe edition and pre-order bonuses. We have received a lot of feedback already. I'll bet you have. I'm sure it's all very positive. And believe it's important to make the store visible now for players to experience and test directly. Items in the store during alpha will be purely cosmetic and provide no gameplay advantages. Yet. Sorry. I got some yet stuck in my throat. It just seemed implied. As the game evolves, we may add new categories and store items based on our players' desires. Based on our players' willingness to give us money and our desire to try to make it. As the game evolves, we may make mistakes, which is why we're testing and engaging with our community to solicit feedback. The alpha store test will include an example skin, emote, and dyes. These are not the exact items we will sell when live, but give you an idea of the type and flavor. This game is going to be a fucking train wreck. I'm going to call it. I'm just calling it now. It's not going to go well. It's going to be great for me, personally, because I probably will be dumb enough to play it just so I can give you feedback. I actually think at this point, though, if I wasn't doing the podcast, I don't think I would even bother with this at this point, to be honest with you. And honestly, I'm still kind of on the fence if I'm willing to spend $50 or $60 just to be able to do that for a bit on the show. Given, I have a feeling this will be a continual multi-month bit on the show. But let's see here. I love this part here. After the launch, however, 2022 or later, as they say, the devs will, quote, consider ideas for items that influence mechanics like rested XP, both through the store and earned in-game. So one of the things that they're talking about this so far is that it seems like the experience given and gained in this game is purposely throttled back so that one day they can actually fix it by having you buy a double XP experience potion, and that would make it feel more like the game actually should be. Now, that is theoretical and hyperbole. I have no proof on that. Neither does anybody else. But when you've played MMOs long enough, you kind of know what pacing should feel like these days. And I have no problem with games going back to old school rules. Scribbles in his Defend the Night, it's more in the classical style of like EverQuest 1. That's purposely what they're going for. And they're not that's the point of the game. It's supposed to be that more old school style of a game as far as I understand it. I understand that from reading their forums on their Discord and talking to him, but this is not what that's supposed to be like. And yes, it will probably cost twice as much in Canadian dollars because even though actually I think I make fun of your money for not being as good as the American dollar, and that was back from like the 90s, honestly. I think to these days there's been points where your dollar is worth more than ours. I think they call it the Canadian leaf. I think you guys just exchange maple leaves like currency up there. That's I understand it from a public education level of understanding of the world and country of the Canada. But yeah, there's nothing good gonna come from this game. It's just disappointing. Let me pull some stuff up here because this part I'm not gonna try to take too long. But it is a complex subject. So in 1921, there was a race riot, as it has been called up until probably I think the last 5 or 6 years. From what I remember now. And then it was switched over to Race Massacre, which is far more accurate. Sometimes I'm not a huge fan of when verbology changes, when something is updated to make it sound worse than it was. But I'm going to be honest with you, having looked into this more recently because it is the 100-year anniversary of the Race Massacre, it's accurate. I'm not gonna be sarcastic because I don't know how to turn that off, but I'm not gonna be making a lot of jokes or hyperbole in this one. What the Greenwood District, which I'm gonna give a quick history lesson on this. The Greenwood District in North Tulsa was known as Black Wall Street back in 1921. This was an affluent neighborhood or area. It's 35 to 40 blocks depending on how you block it out. It was completely razed to the ground. Like if you look up, do yourself a favor, Google Tulsa Race Massacre and look at some of the pictures. The place where buildings were, even for back in 1921, given they weren't super tall, but there were 3-story buildings, housing business, a lot of successful black-owned businesses. They were self-sufficient. The area was entirely self-sufficient. They really were. They were a booming part of Tulsa at the time. But you see the aftermath of the Race Massacre, and it's leveled. Honestly, it looks like something out of Nazi-occupied countries after they bomb like London and various areas all throughout Europe. It's just leveled. There's just rubble. Not a lot of rubble. It's ashes because a lot of it was burned to the ground. So where once buildings stood, it's just plots of land smoldering and smoking. It's awful. It's just one of those things that people don't know about. And the reason I want to do this is, one, I'm a fan of history. I am. As I said at the start of the show, I like all aspects of history, even the dark stuff. I mean, I don't like it, but I want to know it. But this is something, it's a pivotal moment in American history, and it's exactly 100 years ago. And yes, have things changed? Yes. Is most of it for the better? In my opinion, yes. A lot of this, something like this, I don't think would be able to happen. Yes, I know we have the riots and things like that, but unfortunately, that's actually not a lot of, it's not, the black community gets a lot of blame for that, but if you really watch that stuff, it's a lot of white kids with nothing better to do going in and causing trouble as well. It's not entirely that. Yes, there's a mix of it, but there's a lot going on. I'm not going to get into that stuff. I'm just saying that things have changed, and I hope for the better overall. We definitely don't have the kinds of tensions that made this possible over a 2-day period. Actually, it's over a 14-hour period. It spanned from one night into the next morning. So it was 14 hours is all this destruction took place. So real quick, like I said, and I apologize if I bounce around. I really do have troubles focusing sometime, and there is so much to do this. There's no way I can get to all of it. It's just it was a 14-hour period, and it was 35, 40 blocks burned to the ground, razed to the ground. And real quick before I get to what Black Wall Street used to be. Part of the reason this has come about too is, and I've realized a lot of people haven't heard about this. There's a local radio guy. They were talking about it, doing bits on this all week, not bits, but stories on it. And he'd mentioned he didn't know about it until he was 40. And he's lived here almost his entire life. He never heard about it. When I learned about it in school, I learned it as the Tulsa Race Riot. It was a page. If I'm remembering, and it's been a while, trust me, it was a page, maybe 2, in our history book, which is criminal, really. Sorry, my throat's gotten real dry. But the other thing, too, is there were 2 shows recently. One, Renfail in the chat actually mentioned that the first time he had heard about it was because he was watching the Watchmen series on HBO. I think it's HBO, yeah. And that takes place during the night, part of it takes place during that. And there's also, I saw it was an episode in Lovecraft Country that also took them back to 1921 and showed bits of this. I watched the clip of the Watchmen version, and I have to say, from what I've read, part of it seemed extremely inaccurate. Not the part where the people were being killed in the street, but there was a lot of areas where people were riding around in the Klan hoods and things like that, the KKK, which did come in, from what I understand, they came in after this. They held their first rally in Tulsa after this happened, not before. So as far as I know, I didn't see any stories, like there's several timelines I read through, and I didn't see any stories where the Klan was actually involved, which doesn't make this better. I'm not saying the people involved weren't. I don't know. But I definitely never saw anything that exactly, I think that was a bit of cinematic art. What do they call that? When you take liberties with something, I forget now. Flourish, for lack of a better word, because everybody knows the Klan hoods. That's a bad thing, and it makes it very easy to connect that. I mean, given people being herded and gunned down in the street, and in this case, they actually were herded to certain areas in Tulsa and held there. But that part, the one in Lovecraft Country, seemed a lot more accurate. Funny enough, both of them actually had the airplane thing. If you've seen either one of those, they show shots of airplanes flying over. That is accurate. The part that's unknown entirely sure is both of them showed them dropping bombs, and that is actually something rumored to have happened. There's some people say that they were only observing from the sky. Other people say they were sniping and shooting down into the crowds, which is possible. Other people say they were dropping explosives of some kind onto buildings and whatnot. Also entirely possible. I can't say that didn't happen, but it is confirmed there were at least 3 different biplane kind of planes. It's 1921. It's not a fucking Cessna or anything like that, but the planes of the time were in fact flying around and through there. It's entirely, I don't know. The sources I read, they couldn't confirm or deny anything like that, but they did say that there were reports of that, which it just doesn't make it any better. But so, like I was saying, the quick understanding of what Black Wall Street was in the Greenwood District at the time. This article here from, actually it's history, the historychannel.com, or history.com, it's the History Channel. I'm not gonna go. It's a long article, but just give a brief thing. An understanding of that is, let's see. It just says here, at the turn of the 20th century, African Americans founded and developed the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, built on what had formerly been Indian territory, which is all of Oklahoma. I don't know why they included that in there, because I don't think the black people founding the area of the Greenwood District were like, yeah, remember we ran the Indians? No, that had already happened. Most of Oklahoma was at one point Indian territory. Anyway, articles. The community grew and flourished as a black economy and cultural mecca until May 31st, 1921. That's when a white mob began to rampage through some 35 square blocks, decimating the community known proudly as Black Wall Street. Armed rioters, many deputized by local police, true, looted and burned down businesses, true, homes, schools, churches, a hospital, hotel, public library, newspaper offices, and more, all true. And while the official death toll of the race massacre is 36, actually, in stuff I've seen now, actually, according to the 2001 look into it, they raised that to 39. Estimates have been as high as 3,000. The reason they are at 36 and 39 is because that is the number of death certificates that were assigned during that time period, after of people that were found dead. But they say it can be it's more likely between 100 and 300 were killed. Many more injured, by the way. That's just killed, not how many people were injured. And it left as many as 10,000 people homeless. 35 square blocks, I mean, given some of our blocks aren't all that big, but it's a pretty good size. North Tulsa is a pretty big area. The incident stands as one of the most horrific acts of racial violence and domestic terrorism ever committed on American soil. That is accurate. So, let's see here. Actually, yeah, I want to read this because it's important. In May 2021, 100-year-old massacre. 100 years after the massacre, 107-year-old Viola Fletcher testified before Congress, and this is her quote. On May 31st of 21, I went to bed in my family's home in Greenwood. The neighborhood I fell asleep in that night was rich, not just in terms of wealth, but in culture and heritage. My family had a beautiful home. We had great neighbors. I had friends to play with. I felt safe. I had everything I had everything a child could need. I had a bright future. And let's see here. And then she said, came the murderous rampage, still vivid in her mind 100 years later. Imagine how bad. Artistic license. Thank you, Jess, from what I was saying earlier with the Klan stuff. I could not remember that for the life of me. She continues on. Oh, what I was saying. Imagine. So she was 7 years old at the time. She's testifying this last month. 100 years later, which, by the way, good on her. That is a long life. We could only hope to be as clearly bright and vibrant and clear-minded as she seems to be. But that at 7 years old, that you can recall this as vividly she does 100 years later. She continues, I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. That's her testimony to Congress 100 years later. And that's from somebody that was there. It's not, hyperbole or anything like that. That's a 7-year-old is more than old enough to remember things, especially traumatic things like that, very clearly, and it stick in your mind. Especially when I'm sure she's probably relived it day in and day out constantly. So that's what the area was. So I'm sure, like a lot of people, you're wondering, well, what the heck started this whole thing? Like, how can something that is considered to be like called Black Wall Street, it's an actual affluent neighbor, probably one of the better neighborhoods in Tulsa at the time, because that's saying something. In 1921, Tulsa was quoted as being the oil capital of the world. The Saudi Arabias and stuff of the world had barely taken off the ground due to World War I. oil was in high demand as never before. Manufacturing and technology were really starting to take off. So things like oil for lubricants, plastics were being invented of all different varieties and kinds. Oil was it's needed for everything today still, regardless of what people say about trying to get off of oil. That's never going to happen. We're always going to need oil. Why? Because you can't be on your computer or your phone if you don't have oil, you jackass. You still need it. You may not need it for fuel, but you're always going to need oil. I don't know why people don't understand that. But anyway, so the demographics of the area in Tulsa at the time. So most Tulsans were native-born and white, and a surprising, this part, I don't know how to explain this part. I really don't have anything for it. A surprisingly small number, fewer than 1,000, identified themselves as American Indians. I have a feeling that's the thing. It might have been one of those things where they just didn't want to, or at the time of this, I don't know. I really don't have an explanation other than that seems to probably track. And there were about 9,000 living in Tulsa were black. So this is a city, it's a very affluent neighborhood. Yeah, if you passed for white, you did, according to Jazz. And that's what I was thinking too. That you just put it in a better language than I did. So there's only, and this is estimated, there's about 9,000 blacks living in the community centered on Greenwood Avenue, northeast of downtown Tulsa. So 40 square blocks, 9,000 people in that area were black. And this is 1921. Tulsa is definitely not as densely populated as it is now. And trust me when I say we're not that densely populated. We're definitely a big city, but we're not we're not New York or LA or things like that, especially in our downtown area. So most black Tulsans worked as laborers and domestics, but a substantial number were teachers, lawyers, doctors, and other professionals. So it's if I remember right, and this is where people like, let's see, Tulsa, like the rest of Oklahoma, was racially segregated. Greenwood had its own schools, its own post office, substation, its own police station, its own branch library. It had its own thriving commercial district, which Booker T. Washington had called the Black Wall Street of America. This was the Booker T. Washington. Most people have at least heard of Booker T. Washington. God, I hope so. I don't know anymore. I really don't. So let's move on here. That's about modern Tulsa. World War I creates petroleum demand. That's a bunch about the mayor and the chick at the time. Some other Mary Seaman, who she was a city auditor. But let's see. I'm scrolling down through here. Home to doctors. Okay, so then there's the Drexel building, which is where this kind of all started. It was, I forget how many stories this building. It's one of the bigger buildings downtown. I just don't. I'm trying not to give away anything. Okay. Yeah, that's where it goes. So this all started at the Drexel building, which is at 319 South Main Street. It's 4 stories tall. There it is. It's a Rensburg department store occupied occupied the first 2 floors with offices and small businesses upstairs. The building was probably quiet in the morning because remember, this is Memorial Day weekend. A lot of business. This is where a lot of the confusion comes in about why this happened, and there's certain things people don't know if maybe they were secretly seeing each other, or for all accounts the kid involved. Let's see. So anyway, I'll just read it here. There's no reason for me to do it. Rain dampened the holiday activities, included the parade, but a lot of stuff was closed. So the young black man that this all began around, his name was Dick Rowland, and he seemed to be fairly well known. His true identity is a bit of a mystery, which is, like who he actually was, not that his name wasn't Dick Rowland. He's generally identified as the son of David and Alice Ollie Rowland, who operated a boarding house near Piro Building in East Archer, blah, 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 blah. So that was who he was. It kind of goes into his family history, but he was supposedly, according to all accounts of people that knew him, he was a good kid, and he was about. So, some of the details are so fuzzy on this. He was basically a teenager, and so yeah. And adding to the uncertainty is a slight age discrepancy. The census record shows John Rowland's age is 16 in 1920, and Dick Rowland's age when he was arrested a year later was 19. So he was a teenager. It's records from 100 years ago. A lot of this, obviously, because nobody has really heard of this in a lot of parts of the country, or the world, in fact, is buried. Yeah, and some people imply that, but I honestly, if the history doesn't meet a narrative of what you want, and it's a dark part of history, the Massacre of Wounded Knee, which has always been known as the Battle of Wounded Knee, which is another one that was changed from like riot to massacre. It went from battle to massacre because it wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. It was a very dark another dark piece of history, but, people move on from that. But that's not what maybe that'll be something else I go into sometime. That's probably been much longer. So the woman that was quote unquote assaulted, because again, we don't know exactly. Not a lot's known about her name. Her name's Sarah Page. She's originally described as a 17-year-old orphan working her way through business college. It later developed that she may have been as young as 15 and had come to Tulsa from Kansas City while waiting for a divorce to be finalized. That tells you it's 1921 when she's 15 and moved here from another city for her divorce to be finalized. That's crazy. I can't even imagine that. Oh, sorry, good. And I'm sorry if this is kind of shotgun. I know I'm all over the place. People who knew Rowland said that the elevator did not stop level with the third floor threshold, causing him to trip as he entered. I skipped a line here. Some, including Damie Rowland, had fostered the notion that Page and Rowland were romantically involved. The possibility, though possibly true, the story cannot verify through contemporary accounts. They may have, maybe that's one of the theories, is that they were screwing. She's the elevator operator, so they knew each other because he worked on one of the other floors. So maybe they were screwing around in the elevator. Someone's caught them, and in the way of things, they tried to, she screamed and he ran, and it looks guilty, and that was all it took. The other thing here that they say is people who knew Rowland said the elevator did not stop with the third floor threshold, causing him to trip as he entered the car and fall against Page. Police later said that whatever happened, it happened. It was almost certainly not intentional. That's what they say now. Or, even back then, after all of this had happened. In any case, Page's cry caught the attention of a Rainburg's employee who apparently summoned police. Rowland fled, but Page and the clerk, if not actually naming the man, said attacked her, supplied enough of the description for authorities to have no difficulty locating him. So that's the incident that caused all this. Either they were fooling around and got caught, or something as simple as the elevator was slightly higher when he got on, tripped and fell into her, and she freaked out and screamed, and then somebody else came, and because it's the time, you don't want people to know that stuff, so you made an accusation, and we have no way of knowing that. Rowland's arrest the next morning, I believe that happened on the 30th, so now the next morning would be the 31st, and that's when things really start to fall apart very quickly. Rowland's arrest the next morning was reported in a front-page story in that afternoon's Tulsa Tribune, because remember, this is back when papers came out in the morning and the afternoon, which is a thing that a lot of people don't realize used to happen. And the headline is, and I apologize if you're offended by the language, I'm going to be accurate. I'm going to read it as it's written. The headline was, quote, nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator. That's the actual headline. You can actually see the clip of that online still. The somewhat sensational account reported accurately if perhaps imprudently, that Rowland had been charged with attempted assault, which is true, but we don't know, charged with is not the same as convicted as. It said Rowland scratched Paige and tore her clothes, which if you're tripping into somebody, I don't know what fabric was like in the 1920s, but I'd imagine that probably was a very possible thing. This, in the parlance of the day, was tantamount to an accusation of attempted rape. Yes. The mere suggestion of attempted assault, when it involved a white woman, had in the past triggered gruesome lynchings from Duluth, Minnesota to Florida swamps. That is absolutely true. So a lot of that comes from a lot of that. Honestly, if there is a flashpoint to this, it sounds like it was that headline alone. That a lot of this, have they, not made a headline basically accusing him of trying to rape a girl on the elevator, that this would not have gone into what it turned into. We'll never know, because that's not what happened. They also have a thing here real quick that says there's no confirmation. Even this article here in our Tulsa World, which is different than the Tulsa Tribune, by the way. I don't think the Tulsa Tribune is around anymore, if I remember correctly. And if it is, it's 100 years. It's a vastly different thing. They say that there was possibly a headline in the Tribune that was also "To Lynch Negro Tonight," and it's possible. But they say it doesn't seem likely. For one, the Tribune actually editorialized against lynching both before and after the massacre. But, again, if you've seen opinions in editorial sections, you never can tell. But they also, and a call for vigilante justice would have been inconceivably consistent, which is true. But at the same time, you've got newspapers that will put articles in there of opinion pieces on things that have absolutely nothing to do with what the paper itself may actually stand for. The other problem with this is they don't actually have, unlike the headline of the nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator, they don't have any clippings. There's no current proof of such a thing having been printed. And wow, this is taking longer than I thought, but I probably should have known that. So anyway, it basically starts to spiral out of control. Tensions begin to rise slowly. Where's the one? Hold on, I had one here that was a more accurate timeline. Okay. So he's in custody. Now this is Tuesday, the 31st, 1929 of May. At 7:30 p.m., the sun set at 7:08, so it's getting dark. A crowd of 300 white curiosity seekers had formed outside the courthouse. At the courthouse, there were 700 to 800 men, women, and children gathered. And this one here I have, they're all referenced, like who said this. Some of them are insurance companies, others are articles for the Tulsa Tribune and the Tulsa World later on, testimony from people that were there. So the timeline is all verified. 8 p.m., Sheriff McCullough withdraws to the top floor and stationed deputies throughout the building. Number of armed blacks meet up with a car in front of the World offices before heading to the jail. With the outbreak of hostility in Streets Avenue, and the streets evacuate, so things start to tense, and the looky-loos, as we call them here, start to get out of the way. But then the more hostile people start to come out, and I'm not saying just hostile in general. The armed blacks, yeah, absolutely, they probably were on the right of that one. I think this weekend, small tangent, there is a it's their second. It's a group, Black Second Amendment group, and I think it was today or yesterday. I forget which day it was, or maybe it's tomorrow even. They're gonna have a parade and rally, march, armed, with their guns, and this is the Second Amendment. And for a time they actually had a bit of a hard time. They had a bit of trouble getting the permit to actually have that. But in better that some of the other Second Amendment groups here. We're an open carry state, by the way. You don't even have to have a license to carry a gun openly in our state. But a lot of the other Second Amendment groups came out and were on their side. They're like, this group has no history of violence. It's their Second Amendment right. They have as much right as anybody else to go marching through on the 100-year anniversary of this, or any other day if they, and I did like their attitude too. They said, if we didn't get the permits, we'll still be there. We'll just walk on the sidewalks. That's fine, but we would much rather have permission, and they did eventually get it. It was a unanimous decision, I will say. The current people here in Tulsa were like, yep, they did. I don't know why it took so long. I don't know, politics and bureaucracy as my guess is what I'm hoping. So things continue to go on. At 9 p.m., 150 white guys. Like, it just sounds so random. 150 white guys. I think they just mean it more as male. 200 to 300 blacks. A fight breaks out, and that's when stuff just starts going bad. The whites start to come out in droves. National Guard gets called in, but the sheriff, he deputized a whole bunch of people, and it was to help keep the peace. And it was those people that actually started to cause the trouble. And apparently the quote is, all hell broke loose, and that happened at 10 p.m. For a former county investigator named E.S. McQueen confronted a black man, sometimes identified as Johnny Cole, in front of the courthouse. As McQueen and Cole wrestled over the later's gun, it discharged. As more than one person observed, all hell broke loose. So everything to that point had been getting tense, but no shots had been fired. And those two were wrestling over the gun. Looks like the white guy confronted Cole, if that was his name, and trying to get his gun, and it went off, and that was that. The crowd scattered. McCall, who had been trying to talk to the crowd, ran for cover in a nearby hotel. Walter Daggs, an oil company manager who lived near the courthouse, was shot and killed, apparently by a stray bullet. 16-year-old was killed as they left a bank he worked at, gunned down outside another AB stick was gunned down outside a hotel in Tulsa, and reported certain was reported certain to die, but somehow survived. So from there, it just, all it takes, the shots fired. I mean, it's kind of a meme, but for saying stuff. But after that, it just went bad. Everything started to pile up. People were denied. The National Guard denied weapons. Denied weapons at the Denied weapons at the National Guard Armory. Whites, including some police, broke into Barton's Sporting Goods at 510 South Main, across the street from the courthouse, and began taking guns, ammunition. So, for some reason, the guys thought that the National Guard was going to be like, yeah, here, go for it. Just take all the weapons. It's perfectly fine. But they were denied. So instead, they just, did what. Then this was where the rioting part, the Tulsa Race riot, came from, and why they were able to call it that for so long is because looting and rioting began. Looting, all of it by rampaging whites, was reported throughout downtown as shots whizzed haphazardly. Gustafson called in his entire force, around 65 men, who's one of the deputies, and began commissioning special deputies, perhaps as many as 400 of them. Oklahoma National Guard General Charles Barrett and Colonel LJF, I don't know why I couldn't see that, Rooney, senior officers in Tulsa, to make the troops available for local authorities, even though it would be hours before they could officially be called into duty. So this is where things really took a turn. And from here, because there's just so much, and we're barely into it. They start going from building to building. They would loot what's inside, and then they would burn it down. So they were taking a lot of the white people were taking what was inside. The blacks in the area did muster up a defense force in a lot of ways as best they could. I mean, clearly they're outnumbered. The entire population of them was, around 9,000, and that's everybody. That's the elderly, that's the kids, that's, women, men, children, all that. That's not people that are able, fighting age, although there were a lot of women that obviously took up arms. I don't know if you know this. Chicks can be pretty tough, especially back in the 1920s. This is a special breed of woman. Sorry. And then dawn comes, so it's just night. It just things are burning. And dawn comes. A force of, quote, citizens, police, and members of the National Guard, numbering perhaps 1,500, moved into Greenwood from the south and west under orders to take protective custody. To take into protective custody unarmed blacks and to subdue any who resisted. To people in Greenwood, it looked more like an invading army. And there are pictures of the protective custody of them being led with their, down the street with their hands behind their head, going to the local convention center, which is now, I believe, if I remember right, is now the Brady Theater, which is like a world famous kind of. It's very small. I've been there for a concert once or twice, even though I don't go to many. And but it's when I read that, I was weird to think that this place where I went to see Cage the Elephant because Sib won tickets is a place where some almost 100 years before people were taking and putting black residents of the Greenwood district in there for their quote unquote protection. Mostly it was just internment. So. Things move on, and they call it the invasion of the Negro District began. Along with Frisco tracks Major Charles Daly and about 25 men trying to hold back an angry horde of perhaps 1,000. So 25 against 1,000. Daly said he repeatedly sent for help from the police, but he was told they were, quote, busy elsewhere. Finally, the crowd broke away from Daly, and the invasion of the Negro District began. And there's a picture here of all the black guys with their, it looks like guns and rifles and things like that, marching down the street, protecting their area. Yeah, pretty conventional hall, present day Brady Theater. So, yeah, and then they, the people that were supposed to be, helping them for their own good started joined the hoodlums and started shooting at homes and continued with the looting. There's the pictures of them, arms in the air, being marched down into the streets, being treated badly, being kicked and stuff like that. And then, this is all over the course of 14 hours. Eventually, the governor, G.B.A. Robertson, declared martial law, and the National Guard did come in, and as I understand it, and basically locked. They got it all locked down from everybody, from all sides. Detainees were subject to harassment and humiliation. Fairground camp houses up to 5,000. So we have our fairgrounds in Tulsa, which are still there to this day, actually. They're all paved over now, but as far as I know, it's the same spot. And they, as I said earlier, there were 10,000 people left homeless after this. So 5,000 of those end up camped there. I'm sure others probably went to relatives and things like that. There were 39 death certificates. And like I said earlier, 100 to 300 were probably killed. One of the things that's currently going on is that we're still trying to find where all these people were buried. And we're still looking. There's been some promise in the area. Where was that? I don't have it here with me right at this moment. I want to say. Is it the Oaklawn? Oaklawn Cemetery is one of them. There's 3 different areas. They were using things like it. We started an Oklahoma race riot commission. I want to say it was 2017, and that's been, I think it was $1.5 million they put towards the centennial, the city did, as well as trying to find the victims that were buried. And it's not quite a mass grave. Typically, mass graves, as I understand them, is you just throw everybody into a giant hole and cover it up. But they were put in coffins, but they were buried on top of each other in coffins. It's still a mass grave, probably. But they found a few spots where they found at least a dozen coffins stacked on top of each other in deep holes. But they're doing it very carefully. They've got to still get permission to dig all this stuff up. They're not too even if they do, they're not too sure if what they'll find, if they'll be able to find it, but they'll be able to at least give them a proper burial. But there was one story I had seen here. I wanted to find it. But yeah. But anyway, there was another story. I can't find the actual guy, but the kid was with his father, and this was I think 2 years later, and they were visiting an aunt at the grave cemetery, and he pointed over to some trees and said that's where they are. Or the father did. He said that's where they put them all. And he remembered that because he said the area just felt off. It didn't feel right, and he's like, you could just feel that something bad had happened over there. And that's funny enough that it was that guy's testimony about talking about that is what made them look there. And sure enough, the ground penetrating radar actually did find something. So it's and then there was I want to try to find out here. Yeah, and this is why I was talking about earlier with Watchmen, where they were showing guys in the Klan cloaks and hoods in the streets and being part of it, is that according to this, it wasn't until April 1922 when 1,700 Klan members marched through downtown Tulsa, and that was the first Klan rally that happened here in Tulsa, as far as I can find. So that's why it works great for, as I said, artistic license, but from what I understand, that is not believed to be due. Although, let's see. Its first public appearance in Tulsa, although a lot of people believed it had a hand in the massacre, and I don't doubt that. I'm sure there were probably Klansmen there, but as far as all the accounts I could find, I couldn't find anything where they had actually shown up. The fact that racists were there is probably not surprising, given that it was a race massacre. That should be very well and prevalent, so the fact that some of those people would be in the Klan would not be surprising. And I'm sure some of them, with childlike glee, very likely could have been like, oh, finally, this stupid white sheet and pointy hood I've been holding on to all this time and looking for a reason to go traipsing about and nobody will question me. Now is my time. And they do. I have no doubt that some people would do that because they were very proud of their racism back then. Let's see. A lot of the insurance claims were denied. Not surprising. In fact, it says most insurance claims stemming from the massacre were denied because policies typically excluded such damage of, having your house burned down by other people. Very few of the landmarks survived. Like I said, if you've not seen the pictures, it really looks like World War II post-bombing from Nazi Germany. It is utter devastation. There's just nothing left. I can describe it all I want, but there's just no other way to put it. It really does look like a war zone. So it's a very sloppy and very messed up version of that timeline. There's just so much. I mean, it was 14 hours, but think of the busiest day you've ever had in your life, and imagine that, 14-hour period. If you've ever had like a death in the family or something, the way things go so fast and so slow at the same time. I imagine that had to have been what it was like, because you're not talking about just you. There's literally thousands of people in 35 square blocks of area to cover. So and what's happened since then? I mean, the area was utterly devastated. North Tulsa is definitely, it's getting better. The city has finally started making ways into trying to revitalize the area, but sorry, there's a bug. But I wouldn't call it Black Wall Street, not by any stretch of the imagination. It is still largely a black population. It's definitely not what it was then. It's definitely more mixed today. It's not segregated, I guess would be the turn or phrase, because it was back then, as they said. But it's never fully recovered. The highway systems that went through there also didn't do it any favors, according to one article I was reading, which it's not surprising. Most highway systems going through anywhere pretty much can can devastate a large portion of the area and only benefit the areas where the exits are at. Funny enough. But so yeah, it's a quick and dirty history lesson. I highly advise anybody that wants to know more, just look it up. Look up Tulsa Race Riot timeline. There's one here from personal.utulsa.edu that has like a timestamp from like 11 a.m. to 11:45, and they've got references and testimony of everything they claim. It doesn't go into hyperbole. It doesn't go into conjecture or opinions and things like that. It is a dry run timeline, and if I had the time, I would have loved to have just read through that, but it's several pages, and I've probably gone on this longer than I actually maybe needed to or intended to, but I don't know. It's not something I'm going to be doing on the show. This is supposed to be for gaming, movies, and funny stuff. But a 100-year anniversary, it is Memorial Day weekend, if you're listening to this after the fact. And this is something we should remember. It is. I know Memorial Day is for typically soldiers and things like that. But, these people were slain in their own country. And it seems rather fitting, to be honest. I hope to God nothing like this ever happens again. I personally don't think it would, at least not for these reasons. But I don't know. I mean, I only know what I know. I can't tell you the way other people feel, or the way I'm certainly not going to tell them other people how they should feel about a thing. Some people on this, I even saw one guy. He said he met his first race riot denier, and which should have surprised me more. But the fact that people also deny, that we landed on the moon, or that 9/11 was some sort of inside job, or that the world is flat. I don't know why people keep denying and going with this ridiculous round Earth theory when clearly the entire thing is flat. Only an idiot would think that we live on a giant spinning ball in space. I mean, it's a vacuum. It should just pull us apart. But that's why we have our dome over our okay, I can't keep doing that. But yes, I am not surprised that there's probably people there, people out there that deny the Holocaust existed. People can deny anything because ignorance is in abundance, even though we have at our fingertips the vast innumerable knowledge of the internet right at us, and most of us use it just to look up cat memes. I am guilty of that, but I also use it to look up useful things like this. So hopefully you've learned something. I really don't know what else to say about it. There's really not a lot else to... I mean, I can't say that. There's a lot else to say about it. But this is probably not the place for that. Just look it up, please. Do yourself a favor. Learn some history. Learn it where you're at. Learn if you hear about something, look into it. Don't ever be afraid. Don't ever take somebody's word for this just because you like them or you respect or you trust them. Honestly, those are the exact same people you should. If you want to really trust somebody, look up what they're saying and make sure that they actually are doing it accurately. I've missed a whole lot on this. I'm going to tell you that right out of the gate. There's just too much. I mean, it happened over a 14-hour period with thousands of people involved. I've given this 45 minutes. Oops, and I clicked a button. That was what that sound was. My bad. So just always never. Yeah. What was it? The not Andrew Jackson, because he's a horrible, racist, awful person. Thomas Jefferson. Question with boldness even the very existence of God, for if there be a God, surely he would rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear. It's a good quote. It's a good one to live by. So with that, I'm going to stop rambling because I know I'm just going to keep talking in circles. And that's, again, like a better podcast would know that intro and outro are labeled separately for a good reason. That's that. Gonna stop there. I appreciate you listening. If you're listening live, you did it at twitch.tv/crashwillloading, and you are awesome. Just like Jazz, Ericus, and whoever the third person was that came in for a while, and I'm sure had to leave for a very good reason. The kitchen better have been on fire, that's all I gotta say. Click the Discord button under that twitch.tv/crashwillloading, and join us on Discord, and, share your gaming news. Tell me what you thought of this. Should I never do it again? Mind your own business and stick with the funny stuff, dumbass? Or was it something worth doing? It's not something I'm going to do very often. I can guarantee you that. There's not a lot of things that are going to come around 100 years that nobody knows about, or very few people know about. So, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. I am Ashen Phoenix, and I will see you next week. Good night. Or good day.